Hey all, in this video we're going to go ahead and get started on working on a new Firearm customizer from scratch. Now this will apply to the attachment system plugin as well, but I'm just making this inside of the Ultimate FPS framework. Now remember, they are both the exact same systems, so what you follow in this tutorial will carry over exactly the same to the generic attachment system plugin. So to begin, the first one that we have that's basically like started. So this here is the example. Not really complete and it's ugly. So I want to refactor it. Well, not refactor, but basically remake it. Now, this is going to be a brief series, so a very small one, because I'm not going to be going through, I'm not going to be making it pretty. I'm just going to show you the basics. And that is because I'm still supporting UE4 and I don't want to make a full-blown, like really good customizer on UE5 and not be able to really copy and paste it back to UE4 due to backwards compatibility. So what my intention is, build a simple customizer, get you the basics of everything so you can move forward with it. And then in the future, once UE4 is basically fully deprecated from the marketplace, meaning I don't have to use it anymore, then at that point, I will be going through and actually doing a complete revamp of the Firearm customizer, making it nice and pretty and just overall, in my opinion, good. So we're going to basically do the most bare bones, simple example as possible. And that should hopefully help people who are more on the beginner side, which you shouldn't be using these plugins in the first place unless you know until you know what you're doing. That's just my opinion. But it should really make it easier for them to kind of get an overview on how to use the system. So to begin, here we have our tutorial folder. I'm going to make a new folder in it. I'm just going to call this one, I guess, UI. And I'm just going to throw basically everything in there. So now we need to kind of get a rough idea on what happens when we press I, because we want to remove some of what happens now. So here's the widget pose and Firearm customizer example. So when we press I, we call this function here, and let's remove everything related to widget. Okay. Oh, here it is. So show Firearm customizer. Make sure that's the only place I think it's being called. So show Firearm customizer. Okay, so it's actually right here. So duh. But anyways, so what we're gonna do is we're gonna change. We'll make the change here. So here we have the Firearm customizer widget. Let's find its references. Go to where we set it. Widget's right here. So here's where we create the widget. So we're gonna basically change out this one with our own. So to begin, let's just create just a base widget. So we're going to make a new widget blueprint. It's going to be under user widget. And we're going to name this one W_, I guess, tutorial customizer, because I don't plan on replacing it with the one I'm making here. So we're going to do that. And I'm just going to add a button. And that's basically going to be it, just for the sake of visualizing. So now let's go ahead and delete the Firearm customizer widget from the get as well. And find where it's set over here. So Firearm customizer widget, delete. There we go. Okay, so under the create widget, we're going to search for W_tutorial customizer, and we're going to promote it to a variable, and we're going to name this one W_, let's just call it customizer, something relatively simple. Then realistically, we don't need to bother with any of these anymore, but I feel like I'm going to at some, it doesn't matter. So we're just gonna keep it simple. So that's all you're gonna have to do here. We're gonna have an error because it wants us to take in a character component, and we're gonna make a change here. So let's delete the character component from being plugged in. Now let's go back down here for show Firearm widget or Firearm customizer. We're going to grab our W_customizer and just plug it back in the same way that the old one was. So now when we hit play and I press I, we should have a big button. Yeah, like that, where you can't see crap. Okay, so we can delete the button, and that is kind of the, as you could say, base of it. So I'm going to make this one relatively similar to the old one, where it's just a list of components, which would be all of your attachments, and then a list of all the possible attachments, and make it so when you select one, you can replace the attachment, add attachment, so on and so forth. And same thing goes with delete. So for that, we want to kind of build a general layout. So we're going to add in a canvas panel. And keep in mind, I really am bad with UI, period. And we need to figure out kind of how we want to dock it. So since I'm following kind of the theme of the last one, we're just going to dock it to the right-hand side. And keep in mind the functionality, it is going to work in a similar manner to the old one, but is going to be drastically simpler. Because the old one uses basically the old system. It doesn't use the attachment manager as it should, whereas this one will. So we add a canvas panel, and on the right-hand side, we also want to add a horizontal box. Where's the H? There it is. So we're going to grab a horizontal box, and we are going to anchor it, and you can control-click to change your anchors kind of automatically. So like you can see there, I didn't. If I control-click, it does. We want to anchor to the right-hand side, and the alignment on the X, we're going to do 1. And then for the size on the X, let's just do something like 500. Semi-large, not crazy. Then in here, we want to have pretty much 2 vertical boxes. So this could be built up as a separate widget, or in this case, we're going to build this all into one. So we're going to add a vertical box to it right here. We're going to fill it. And then we're going to add another one. And same thing, we're going to fill it. So now we have 2 vertical boxes. So one on the left-hand side, which is going to show us our attachment components, and then one on the right-hand side, which is going to show us all the possible attachments we can add to it. So let's start naming. So we're going to change the left vertical box to VB underscore components, and the right one to VB underscore possible attachments. I guess let's name the first one to attachment components, just to really kind of have a clear naming thing to follow. All right, head over to the graph, delete the tick, delete the pre-construct. We're just going to leave with the event construct, and we're going to add a variable. Now the type for this is going to be the attachment manager. It's going to be an object reference. Let's give the name of attachment manager, make it instance editable, and expose on spawn. File save, and now where we go up where we create the widget, so create tutorial customizer widget, go ahead and refresh. You can see it takes in an attachment manager. Now this is going to be pretty much, let's see, what do you call it? We want to pass in the attachment widget, so to speak, or not the attachment widget, the attachment manager. But if we're the client, we don't necessarily have access to the firearm as is. So that might be something we would want to have an optional. So by default, we're not going to have this attachment manager, simply put. But what we will have is an event that basically handles everything for us. So what we're going to do is create a new event, so custom event. And we're going to call this one set attachment manager. And it is simply going to take in, same thing, an attachment manager. Now keep in mind, let's actually name this first, in attachment manager. Now keep in mind, I am like in no way, shape, or form, what do you call it? Pre-planning this. I'm kind of winging it. But anyways, what we're going to do, we're going to do a check. So let's go ahead and assign it. So we set the attachment manager first. And from here, we want to do a check. So if it is valid, then we go through and we basically update the UI. So now we need to figure out where we want to call set attachment manager from. So what we can do is when we open the Firearm customizer, or we show it, so to speak, we make it, visible on screen. And let me move this out of the way. All right, cool. Don't, drag everything. What the heck? Well, that's a neat trick. I'll clean that up here in a second. So we're going to move this up kind of so everything's in a clean place. So let's try to clean this up. Inner fire, that goes here. Then this guy here. Yeah, simple enough. Let's spread this out a little bit. Okay. So when we add it to the viewport, what we can do is we can pretty much just show the Firearm customizer. So what we can do as kind of like a test is before we enter the Firearm customizer, we can check and make sure we do have a held actor that implements the attachment manager, that kind of stuff. But for the time being, again, I'm going to be completely overhauling this in a future video. So we're going to grab the character component. We're going to get the held actor. And if it's valid, what we want to do is we want to check for the attachment manager. So we're going to call get attachment manager off the held actor. So the held actor should be our firearm in the case of what we're doing. So we can search from our customizer, set attachment manager, and just plug it in. So now what we're going to do is, if it's valid, we're just going to simply print hello. So I hit play, I press I, you can see we have hello. And now we have our moved camera. Yeah, it's annoying. So we have our attachment manager. From here, we're going to clean this out, and we're basically going to start just setting up some basic events. So for example, populating the attachment components, and have another one for populating the, the possible attachments. So we have our VB attachment components. So we're going to create a custom event, and I'm going to stop this video after I get it listing the attachment components. We're going to call this one, let's do populate attachment components. And same thing again, we grab our attachment manager, and we're going to make sure it's valid, because otherwise we really don't want to do anything. Actually, I guess technically we would want to clear it. So we're going to grab VB attachment components. We're going to call clear children. And then we're going to do the valid check. And that'll just keep things so if we want to, we can kind of clear it out just for the sake of calling it if there is nothing that's valid. So now we want to get all, I'm being blind as a bat, get all attachment components. Here we have the option to recache. So I'll kind of explain that in a later point, but we want to iterate over the attachment components. So, for example, we now have the attachment component object reference. So if we search for things like name, we have get component name, and then we have two different ones to kind of get it as a text or a string. But here we want to basically create a widget that will take in the attachment component. And that'll populate it with a button and give it a text over the button that has the component name. So we're going to create a widget as well. So another widget blueprint of user widget, call it W underscore attachment component. All right, same thing, delete the tick, delete the pre-construct, and we're going to add a new variable, and this one's going to be the attachment component. And that's going to be the type, attachment component. So SKG attachment component, object reference, instance editable, and expose on spawn. Very simple. In the designer, we're going to give this a button and text over the button. So the text, I just flat out want it to fill. And button, I'm going to change it's a color and opacity. That controls the children. So I want to make it black and give it the alpha of like 0.4, so it's semi-transparent. Then we're going to give it the text block of TB. We're going to make it a variable underscore component name. Justification, we'll do the left-hand side, just kind of leave everything the same. And yeah, I'm okay with that for the time being without actually seeing it. Now, same thing with the button. We want to give that a name of B underscore component, just so it's clean. Go back to the graph, and we're going to drag out the attachment component, and we're going to search for name. Here we have get component name, string, text. We're going to do text. So this basically just kind of saves us from casting and blueprint. So this will do it in C++ for us. And we're going to grab our text box. We're going to search for set text, like so, and just plug it in. So let me move this around, clean it up, just like that. So now back in our main widget, we're going to search for create widget. What we're going to create is the attachment component. Where did I spell it wrong? Attachment component. Yeah, it's this one. So there's a couple of different ones. And we're going to plug in the array element into attachment component. And then simply once that's done, we can grab our vertical box of attachment components and add child to vertical box and just plug it in. So we compile, we hit save. Now when we go and hit play, press I need to actually see it because this should be firing. Let me also enable recast just to make sure. Press I. So something along the lines is not running. So let's go ahead and do a check. So we're going to do a print string. Make sure that hello prints, which it does not. So the reason for that is because I'm an idiot and I forgot to call populate attachment components. So populate attachment components. So let's call it. So we press I, and there we go. So we have 3 attachment components, none, none, and none. Now if we head over to our firearm, that's where we'll be able to change some of these up. So we have the sight, the muzzle, and the forward grip. And I do not know why they are a child of the sight. But anyways, start with the sight, go to customization, and by default they have a component name. So I want to call this one sights. I'm going to call this one forward grips. And I'm going to call this one muzzle devices. Compile save, and now when we hit play, press I, you can see we now have the components sights, muzzle devices, and forward grips. So it's pretty simple and straightforward. You can go through and just kind of get an idea on how this kind of works. I do need to clean up how it attaches here. But all it's doing, and I'll go ahead and step through this really quick because this is becoming a long video and the future video should be a lot shorter. But when we show the attachment or the widget to our viewport, like we make it where it's visible, we're simply calling set attachment manager. And when that happens, all we're doing is we're going to loop over all of the attachment components that have been cached in the attachment manager. And that's basically going to be your sight, your muzzle, your forward grip, in the case of this firearm. So for every single attachment component that we have, we want to create another widget that will contain some other stuff, such as the name of the attachment component. So this could be a couple other things. So if you look at the attachment manager, the generic attachment system plugin, where I built the UI for that, I made it so it'll show if the attachment manager or if the attachment component has a valid attachment, it'll show what attachment is there. Otherwise, it just shows the little circle with a line through it. So something very clean like that. And that's something I want to do in the future. So we create the widget. In this case, it's just a button that contains the text. And all we do is we add it to the vertical box. There is nothing more to that. The only thing we want to do now is set up an event or set up so where we can pass it through here. So this attachment widget will know of the parent. So in this case, the tutorial customizer. So that way, what we can do is we can kind of segregate this to where everything big happens here. So what we're going to do is in our attachment component widget, we're going to add a new variable, and this one's going to be called the tutorial or w_tutorial customizer. And it's going to be the same type, w_tutorial customizer, object reference, instance editable, and expose on spawn. Compile save. And over here where we have create widget, we're just going to right click, refresh. And for this new parameter here, we're just going to search for self. And that's it. So that way we can right click, we can add a new custom event. We're going to call this one populate possible attachments. And I'll run a print string, which we're not actually going to be able to see yet. But inside the attachment component, if we go back to the button and we add an on clicked, what we can do is we can get the W_tutorial customizer, the widget we have, basically our parent, and we can call populate possible attachments. Now what we want to do to make sure we know we're getting the right one is this event here, populate possible attachments. We want to make it take in the attachment component that was basically the one that we clicked. So same thing, we just search for attachment component and call this attachment component. And I'll go ahead and print it out. So for here, all we do is we just pass in the attachment component that we passed. So the logic for this is when we, Shift F1. So we have sites. If I click on sites, what's going to happen is this on click is going to run. We're going to call populate possible attachments, and we're going to pass in the attachment component that is, in this case, our sites. So from there, this will run, and all we have to do is get possible attachments, and that returns an array of possible attachments for us to use. So it's a very simple system, and I'll expand more on this later. So I'm not really sure what else to say, but in the next video, we're going to probably wrap this up to where we can have the possible attachments as well. So that's going to be the exact same concept as the attachment component, where we basically just create a widget that contains a button with maybe an image in it such that represents the attachment, that kind of stuff. But anyways, I'll see you in the next one. This has moved on for 20 minutes, but we have the bulk of it actually already done. So I'll see you in the next video.